businesses, right?
Yes.
So tell me how that all changed. I mean, it kind of seems like the nightclubs kind of disappeared over time.
Well, I'm still researching a lot of the period of the 70s and 80s and what kind of happened there, but the 70s seemed like it almost became a low point where there really wasn't a whole lot because there was a lot of pressure from elsewhere, from other elements of the business community to put a lid on this kind of small fry musical operation and to give preference towards more official channels. If you're having large concerts come through, they should be happening at the Cal Expo Amphitheater. At one of the reasons given to not save the Alhambra was because they felt like events at the Alhambra Theater would compete with events at the Community Center Theater, which was under construction at the time. Okay. And so, challenging the official Chamber of Commerce line became very risky for any business, and you risked bringing down official pressure. And people like Stuart Katz, who put on punk shows in places like Club Minimal, got a lot of pressure. They weren't issued dance permits required if you had a capacity over 100 in order to put on live shows. If you happened to be connected and in the know, you didn't have to worry about it. But if you were outside that circle, if you were doing something that was a little more challenging, a little more unique, it was a lot harder to get official recognition. And Sacramento, it wasn't big enough or ungainly enough, as a lot of big cities were, for big things to happen underneath the radar. You could do things on the QT for a while. You could do an unofficial venue for a while. You had people doing punk shows at places like the Oddfellows Hall, about a block or so away, but you could only do a couple before the cops would show up, and they had no idea how to deal with punk rock. A friend of mine told me that the only thing they knew about punk was the episode of Quincy, the punk rock episode, and they just had no frame of reference, so they didn't know whether these were anarchists who were just going to start tearing things apart, or how to deal with them at all. And so it was a very uncomfortable period for Sacramento music scene.
What about, say, like the Oasis Ballroom? Did that become a pretty big, hot spot for maybe not just punk, but just any kind of rock?
I know a lot of people who moved nearby in part because of access to the Oasis Ballroom and being able to go to live shows there. And they did have a lot of drawing power and a lot of musical connections. There were still plenty of things happening. I didn't witness a lot of this firsthand. I was in high school out in the suburbs and didn't have a car. I saw the flyers, and I was, gosh, I want to go downtown. I want to live down there because all the cool stuff is happening downtown. I'd come down and visit during the day on the bus, but of course the bus stopped running at 6 o'clock, so I had to hop on home unless I wanted to stay up at the Denny's all night after a show. But
so we're talking 80s, right?
Yes, correct.
So don't you agree that the 80s was a pretty vibrant scene downtown?
And it was interesting, but it was, like I said, it was interesting, I think, in a different way. And I didn't see enough of it firsthand to be able to speak on those terms. So I'd have a hard time.
The reason I say that is I recall like the J Street cruise. Everyone would come out on a Friday night for the cruise. It was like just long lines of almost like parades of people watching people cruise down J Street.
Well, that's an old tradition that goes back to the 50s on K Street, back when you could still drive on K Street.
Okay.
And that car culture, connections to it, that also provoked a negative response from the city because kids love cruising. They love going out and seeing and being seen. But the problem is that businesses adjacent to it don't like it at all. You're taking up their parking spaces, you're slowing up traffic for people who do want to get there. You're not spending any money, so you're not doing the business community any good. So once again, that brings social pressure. You're outside the mainstream, you're outside the Chamber of Commerce's model of what should be done downtown, which is either work or shop. And once you're done with those, you should go home, stay in your room.
By Macy's, there's Westfield Shopping Center. When did that mall get constructed?
The first phase of it was the late 60s. And that was the first part to get built. I have a photo in my new book where you can see the section from 2nd to 7th Street being built, but west or east of 7th Street, it's still an open street. And then the rest of the pedestrian mall was put in later. So it was a multi-phased approach. They did a part at a time and then expanded it to go all the way from what's now Interstate 5 to their new convention center in the mid-70s.
It seemed like, say like in the 90s, America Live was a big draw, and then it became the Hard Rock Cafe, and I guess I lost track of it after that.
America Live was a big draw for about a month, I think.
Oh, really?
I went there one time because they had this robot video game thing here, and we had a coupon to go for free, so a bunch of little punks lived in Midtown, and I saddled up and went down there, and we played the robot video game for 10 minutes, and then we skedaddled out of there, and I didn't set foot in the place ever again.
Okay.
And so the problem with that kind of concept is, once again, it's based on a come here, spend some money, go home model. It's not a neighborhood.
It's not a hangout.
Hanging out is not encouraged. Hanging out's not in the business model.
That's interesting. Has that always been true with the Chamber of Commerce?
It wasn't always true by any means. One of the other things I found writing a book on K Street, the Chamber of Commerce started out putting on these great street parties in downtown Sacramento. They celebrated street life. They embraced it, and they put on special events like the Days of 49 celebration, which happened right where our train station is now. At the time, it was a pile of dirt that it was the last portion of a swamp that they finally filled after decades of sort of throwing things in the swamp. The Days of 49 was supposed to unify the city after a particularly contentious battle and change the city charter. And it was a very successful street party. They had done earlier events in 1900, 1901, 1902. In May, there was this big citywide fair to make use of state fairgrounds facilities at 15th and Capitol, and that also featured a march up and down J and K Street. So no, the Chamber of Commerce wasn't always like that. There was really a shift in the way American cities were built. This is not something unique to Sacramento. This is a national story where we went from cities are a place to live. Thousands of people lived in this neighborhood, not just working class people, but middle class people, wealthy people, could get back and forth using privately owned public transit systems. Like I said, there were multiple streetcar lines, and be in relatively close proximity to each other. But a school of thought about things need to be more segregated came into fashion. And then these business owners, who typically also owned farms, started turning their farms into suburbs and wanted people to live in the suburbs and then commute downtown. And then the center city stopped being such a universal place and started to be a special purpose space. And by the middle of the 20th century, the old model of a city was very much broken, because this is a neighborhood designed to work as a unit. It's designed as a place where you could live, where you could shop, you could do all the things you wanted to do in a relatively small radius. And the post-war model was you live in one place, you work in another place, you shop in a third place, and you use a car to get between them. Now, a place like K Street doesn't work on any of those levels. None of these places have parking lots, so there's no place to park your car. The uses are all mixed up, so there's no way to tell where the living space, the working space, and the playing space ends and begins. So people can't make sense of it if they are really into this separated, segregated model of life. And we're just now starting to recombine it. The story of the early 21st century is becoming the revival of cities and the return of that kind of mode of life, being able to live in a neighborhood which is also your workplace, also your recreation, and being able to encounter people who aren't necessarily exactly like the ones that we find in the suburban neighborhood. Not that people who live in suburbs are bad, but it's a different idea of how life works. And it was very fashionable in the 20th century. It broke a lot of cities. Now we're learning how to fix it.
Interesting Sacramento history. Thanks a lot.